you so much for coming on.
Simon, thank you, and please call me Rick.
Rick? Oh, yeah. All right. So, Rick, the first question I want to ask you is you've done a lot of research in neuroscience. I've also looked at your site, and you draw a lot from Eastern philosophy and Eastern traditions, like meditation. I saw that you have a Wednesday meditation thing, which are you doing that like right after this?
Yeah, in a few hours.
It's pretty cool. It's cool. All right, so my first question is, what have you learned so far about maintaining healthy relationships? What are the most important factors? Do you think there's one most important factor, if there is one at all?
I think there are, I'll say my top three that are very close to first place, all of them, but I'll do it maybe in order. Number one is to be on your own side, which sounds like a contradiction. Like, how do we make a good relationship, which is about other people? Why is it important to be for ourselves on our own side? I mean that in healthy ways, not aggressive, not selfish or narcissistic, but having respect for yourself and caring about your needs in the relationship and thinking about what's in your best interest, which includes treating other people well and not mistreating them, because that's not in your best interest, really. So number one, getting on your own side. And that is already the case for many people, but many other people, especially if they have been socialized in a culture or based on gender in ways that are about taking care of others rather than taking care of themselves, it's really important to be grounded in the fundamental stance of being a friend to yourself, being a good guide and ally and cheerleader for yourself. So that would be my number one. Close second is to have a warm heart, in ways that are authentic for you. See the good in others, enter into a relationship trying to build up rather than tear down. Have compassion, which is not agreement. We can have compassion for people we disagree with, we oppose, we disapprove of. Compassion is separate. So come in with a warm heart. Look for the good, feel the good, cultivate love, have a warm heart. That's good for you. There's a lot of research that shows that prosocial feelings and body sensations are protective against the impact of stress. And they also, promote seeing opportunities to come from a kind of a warm place. Plus, it tends to elicit good treatment from other people when they sense that you are interested and have a warm heart. The third, very close, but I'll call it in third place, is to repair. Prepare to repair. Repair. Relationships, especially significant ones, they need little repairs. You sort out little misunderstandings, you reestablish agreements with each other, mutual, approaches to things. Maybe there's something that happened that upset somebody or hurt somebody, even if you did not realize it. Sometimes it's a big thing. Big relationships sometimes need big repairs, like with family or with partners, lovers, spouses, children, parents, good friends, and so forth. Repair. So those would be my three. And in my books, I talk a lot about how to repair. So there are a lot of details about that. But those would be the big three. Get on your own side, bring a warm heart, and as needed, make repairs.
About make repairs, would that sort of be like anticipate that the relationship won't be perfect, anticipate that there will be problems, and then just
Yeah,
be ready for that.
yeah. And have it be normal. It does not
Mhm.
end a relationship. The lack of repair often ends relationships. But having something to
Mhm.
repair in the first place is where we start.
Mhm.
You know, it's not where we end.
So when we enter relationships, we can't expect them to always go smoothly.
That would be pretty unrealistic,
Yeah.
especially if it's a significant relationship.
Mhm.
If it's a trivial relationship, like they're just somebody that you joke with where you get your coffee.
Yeah.
You know, you like them, they like you. It's not a big deal. You don't even know each other's last names, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, they know your name because they put it on the coffee cup, and you know
Yeah.
their name because they have a name tag. But that's it. But you
Mhm.
know, you probably don't need to anticipate the need for repair. But if you have a roommate
Yeah.
or a lover or a life partner, or you know, our son and his partner just bought a house with some other people. They're going to share a house with
Oh,
them.
really?
Yeah, hello. You're going to need to repair. You
Yeah.
know, one way, not just the house, but I mean, you're going to need to work out, you know,
Yeah.
solve problems, resolve issues, you know, make
Mhm.
agreements with each other, uh, negotiate. Those are all
Mhm.
forms of repair. Being present when another person has something they want that's different from what you want,
Mhm.
right? Can you receive their wants without fighting back immediately? And can you look for the maximum reasonable amount of giving them what they want,
Mhm.
both as an expression of your caring for them, but also out of self interest? Because as you take care of their complaints about you that
Mhm.
you consider reasonable, you consider, because you're on your own side, remember?
Mhm.
You consider reasonable. If you take care of their complaints one by one and then enjoy over time what could be called the bliss of blamelessness, right?
Mhm.
That's in your self interest because it reduces arguments and it also puts you in a position over time to ask for more from them
Mhm.
because you are practicing what I call unilateral virtue. You are taking care of your side of the street.
Mhm. Uh, as for number one, being on your own side, what would be an example of someone who's not on their own side? Would that mean like a codependency or like
Yeah, that would be
allowing
an
yourself?
example. And I want to
Yeah.
be clear. Sometimes we have relationships like parents with children, or
Mhm.
you know, you have a friend who's dealing with some real problems. You know, you decide it's appropriate to really, really take good care of them,
Mhm.
and that means sometimes putting your own needs on the back burner.
Mhm.
That's okay. But relationships in which you feel that you are not entitled to say what you want or how you were affected by somebody,
Mhm.
you know, um, that raises the question of whether you are on your own side. Now, it may be that you are on your own side, but it would not be skillful or appropriate or safe, perhaps, to assert for yourself, to stand up for yourself. Maybe you need to stay quiet to
Mhm.
survive, seriously, sometimes. But long term, you know, a lack of appropriate assertiveness at work
Mhm.
or at home or with friends, that would indicate difficulties in being on your own side,
Mhm.
right? Uh, it's an interesting contrast. Just bring to mind someone that you like,
Mhm.
who's important to you, and just ask yourself, oh, am I loyal to them? Do I care about them? Am I committed to their well being? Will I come through for them? Will I make efforts on their behalf?
Mhm.
If the answer is no,
Oh yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
And they are actually probably not that important to you.
Mhm.
But bring to mind someone you care about, you really care about, you care about, uh,
Mhm.
right? It could be your dog, it could be your cat, it could be your friend, your child, and so forth. It could be a teacher, someone who has been a benefactor for you. Okay?
Mhm.
Let's bring that to mind. Know what it feels like to be loyal to someone, to be on their side. And then ask yourself, Huh. By contrast, compared to that other person, how do I treat myself? Whoa. Can I be a friend who sees the good toward myself like I am to them? I see the good in them. I let the little silly stuff go. Doesn't matter. Can I bring that same attitude to myself? Wow. Most people are much harder on themselves than they are on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between self-guidance and self-criticism. So I'll give an example from rock climbing. So I've done a lot of rock climbing. And as I've gotten older, I've used guides, people who will go out. They're better climbers than I am. They'll climb up first and then I'll come up second, safely. And most of my guides have been very supportive. They are telling me what to do sometimes and encouraging me to hurry up because the rain is coming, or pointing out if I did not tie a knot correctly, but they are not mean about it. Then I had one other guide, a very different kind of person who was just critical, mean, angry, busy, full of pressure, because I wasn't climbing fast enough or something. And that's not good. Well, think about those two ways of guiding someone inside your own mind, right? You can still pursue excellence. You can still be a top performer. If you're a student, you can still try to do really well and go forward in your career, but not on the basis of that second kind of guide, not on the basis of harsh, unnecessary pushiness and criticism.
So in our relationships, we have to seek to be like the first kind of guy.
That's a great question. I think that's a better way to do it
Mm-hmm.
with the understanding,
Yeah.
that sometimes other people do not want your guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't want it. And then it gets very interesting, how to communicate. Uh, um, for me, there's a difference between those things that which we have, with regard to which we have objective self-interest. In other words, there's certain, like a roommate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a roommate and you share a refrigerator, thinking back to my, youth,
Mm-hmm.
and they take their food and you have different shelves, like there's Simon's shelf and their shelf, and yet they keep putting stuff on your shelf.
Mm-hmm.
You are directly affected by them. On the other hand, if they keep their room really messy, they never make their bed, it's just a total disaster, and you are naturally a kind of neat person. And every time you walk by their bedroom, which is separate from yours, every time you walk by their bedroom, you're like, what a mess. That does not directly affect you.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, in the first case, in which you would like to guide them into keeping their stuff on their shelf and keep the darn agreement with you that they made, that is one kind of approach. The
Mm-hmm.
other kind is where you think it would be good for them to do something differently, and
Mm-hmm.
then that's a second category. That is more like a yellow flag, because is it really your business?
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, sometimes there are people like you really care about and you're worried about, and you're watching them do some things that, as a friend or a parent or a child or a brother or a sister, you just think, well, it's not good for you. Maybe they're getting too deep into drugs,
Mm-hmm.
or they're in a relationship in which they're being mistreated by some asshole, right? Or they're just doing reckless things, like they're driving while having had too many drinks, and you just want to tell them something. Now, then it's that one's a lot, that's tricky, but sometimes you feel like you need to do it. So then the question becomes how to do it skillfully. And in my book, Making Great Relationships, and in my courses online, and all my courses are free to people with financial need, like students. So you could see a course I have Like one is happening right now called The Strong Heart, which is about the combination of kindness and assertiveness, the two together, which is very much the sweet spot that we're talking about here. The point is there are ways to assert yourself effectively, like with your roommate putting their food on your shelf,
Mm.
and even bigger problems. And there are ways to also communicate uh, with people that you care about that you want to offer some guidance to. And I could talk with you about some of the big how-tos about that if you want, but people can learn a lot from the material I have on my website, including much of it freely offered. rickhanson.com.
One thing I'm wondering is there are a lot of practices from monks, such as meditation. There's a lot of, like, I'm familiar with some Confucian teachings because of obviously my parents' historical background. So what I'm
Yeah.
wondering is, do you think, what are some ways in which like the science has supported the teachings of Eastern religions and philosophies and also Judeo-Christian teachings? And if you want to talk about it, are there any ways in which neuroscience has like challenged these teachings?
Very good. Well, so neuroscience explores the neurological correlates to our experiences and the results or changes in the brain that seem to be correlated with changes in the mind as people become more mindful or compassionate or emotionally regulated, things like that. And so evidence of mental change is evidence of neurological change. So even without an MRI or an EEG, if someone meditates, and let's say, and they experience being calmer and more centered and more resilient and quicker to come back to their home base inside when they're challenged, that's evidence of mental change, which is evidence of neurological change. So there's a lot of evidence for that, both informal evidence and studies that do various psychological interventions and observe a psychological change, presumably through intervening in the underlying black box of the brain. So right off the top, we already have a lot of evidence, both non-scientific evidence in the contemplative traditions of the world, as well as in 100 years of real research, careful research in psychology broadly. Okay. Recently, brain science, particularly with assessment tools like MRI, fMRI, have been able to show the underlying neurological correlates of different kinds of mental activity, like meditation, and demonstrate lasting changes in the brain in its structure or function. Now, in effect, brain science is just confirming what we already knew. Mental practices produce mental results. Psychological practices produce psychological results. But there is something powerful about seeing the physical changes in images from MRIs. And it is motivating to realize that, oh, wow, these airy-fairy, new age or religious, quote unquote, practices are actually changing my brain for the better. Okay, it's real. It's real. Okay, it's real. Right. Well, it was always real, but now we have a very tangible kind of evidence that it's real. So that's been really useful. Brain science, where I would say in particular, it's added, it has dramatically supported perspectives, certainly from the Eastern traditions, is demonstrating that the apparent integrated, cohesive, enduring, and independent self cannot be found anywhere in the brain. What you find is that the parts of the brain that get engaged when we are doing self-referential things, like identifying a picture of ourselves out of a group of people, like that's Rick, over there is Simon, or communicating an important value, like our stand on capital punishment or the right to abortion, let's say. there's activity all over the brain. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also very dynamic, and it is very dependent on what is happening at the time. So that is a way of reinforcing the notion scientifically from the East that the self is empty, empty of solidity, independence, absolute identity, because it is made of parts that are connected and changing.
Mm-hmm.
So this, right? So that's pretty persuasive evidence from brain science. I think there are some other really cool. I'll name one. There is a difference between liking and wanting, and by which I mean there's a difference between enjoying the pleasure of eating a cookie,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, or having sex. That's different from needing to eat the whole bag of cookies or have sex every day. There's a difference between liking and wanting. And it's important to be able to have passion and purpose and try hard. But when people get caught up in craving, that's the second noble truth in Buddhism. When people get caught up in craving, where they become very driven toward their goals and angry about them and frustrated, and they take things personally about their goals, they get very attached to the result, and get very upset and angry and even suicidal if they do not achieve their goals. Well, that's a problem. And interestingly, in the brain, in the nucleus accumbens, this has to do with the work of Kent Berridge, Berridge. Some listeners may be aware of that work already. In the nucleus accumbens, which is the ventral lower striatum in the basal ganglia, there are two separate nodes. There are distinct, physically, anatomically distinct little nodes, like cubic millimeters, maybe a little larger, of brain tissue that focus on liking distinct from wanting. So that, because these are decoupled anatomically, we can like without wanting. We can enjoy something without getting driven about it and attached to it. That's enlightenment in a lot of ways. That's a big part of enlightenment. Similarly, on the sad side, we can want things that we don't particularly enjoy. Like in drug addiction, for example, people need the drug, but when they get it, they don't really enjoy it. The craving goes away, the suffering in the craving goes away, but there's not much reward. I think about people pulling the slot machine levers in a casino over and over and over again. And then when a bunch of quarters fall into the bucket, they go, and then they keep pulling again and again. So it's interesting that neuroscience highlights a distinction that's actually really useful in everyday life. Okay, so I'll stop there.
It's sort of like a hedonic treadmill. Sorry, did that go through?
I think that's your phone.
Yeah, I'll put it. I don't know why I'm so sorry. I did. Yo, Sam, can you get that? All right.
Yeah. No worries. You just
All right.
take it out. That's wonderful about recordings.
Oh, my brother.
Yeah, and we'll finish here.
No, sorry. Yeah.
That's so you asked about the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Like you think X will make you happy, and then you get it, and then you just start looking for the next thing. I was kind of reminded of that when you were talking about
now I understand you. I think that's a very smart and interesting association here, because you're right. The way I think of it a little differently, and then I want to go back to the so-called hedonic treadmill, which is not that accurate, actually, as people understand it better. And really? I can talk about some of the complications with that. It is true. I think that there is almost like an inner advertising agency that is saying, oh, just get the cookie. Oh, just get, the promotion. Oh, just get the person to love you.
Mm,
And to motivate us, those subcortical regions, that he began to evolve 200 million years ago, they're pretty primitive. They tend to exaggerate. They
mm,
tend to exaggerate how good the rewards will be or how horrible the penalties, the costs will be
mm,
if we fail to prevent something.
mm,
Okay. And when you actually live through it, you realize, oh, wow, the cookie tastes good. It's nice
mm,
that this person loves me or likes me. It's nice that my boss appreciated my performance there. It's nice that I got the A on that in that class, right?
mm,
Or on that project. And yeah, it's nice, but it's usually not as great as was advertised. So
yeah,
knowing that, understanding that, I think is a very wise point you're making here.
mm,
Um, and understanding it can also help us be lighter in our wants. Know it is important, work hard,
mm,
do your job, solve problems, but be realistic about um, the rewards from outcomes
mm,
and focus as much as you can on process rewards, intrinsic rewards along the way,
mm,
like a sense of your own virtuous efforts
mm,
and what you are learning and how you are growing along the way.
mm,
That's a huge point. Very astute.
mm,
Hedonic treadmill, briefly, people, and the basic idea is that um, if we have a good thing happen, great, but we tend to return to our baseline. So it's a little bit like a treadmill. So we make efforts,
mm,
but our overall well being does not improve over time.
yeah,
And that idea got a lot of attention. I think partly because our culture is really primed to look for any critique it can find against positive psychology.
mm,
And yet, there is overwhelming evidence that the fundamental ideas of the hedonic treadmill are completely wrong. For example, there is tremendous evidence that people who make, skillful efforts to become less anxious or less depressed or less angry can actually raise their set point in terms of their basic well-being in life very
mm,
significantly and stably, durably.
mm,
So it's not like they're in a treadmill constantly going to
mm,
therapy while staying depressed.
yeah,
Some people do, and then you have to look at the kind of therapy they're doing and whether medication would be useful, blah, blah.
mm,
But many, many people, there's tons of evidence that shows the benefits
mm,
of psychotherapy and also other things for relieving suffering. Boom, right there.
mm,
That improves your treadmill.
mm,
Second, there's a lot of evidence also that setbacks, like an accident, will take a lot longer to recover from, to return to your baseline,
mm,
than positive things like winning the lottery. That has to do with the negativity bias of the brain.
yeah,
So the treadmill is, as it were, it's different for the impact of negative experiences and how long that takes you to return to your baseline
mm,
compared to positive things. And then the last point is that, again, too, there's much evidence that as people improve their circumstances in life, on average, they tend to experience more and more well-being.
mm,
Sometimes it is said money cannot bring happiness, but it can gradually eliminate many causes of unhappiness, like health problems or living in dangerous neighborhoods or not feeling you have options to get out of a not good relationship. So that lifts your set point.
mm,
Improving your circumstances can really do that.
mm,
Um, and I'll just say, I think I told you earlier that in terms of repair, that our son and his partner were just recently able to buy a house, and
mm,
my wife and I are able to give them some help, and as like my parents gave me some help,
mm,
gave us some help, and it makes me very happy to be able to do that. right?
Mm-hmm.
So my circumstances have over time, enabled, I'm not at all rich, I'm just comfortable, but have
Yeah.
enabled me at age 71 to be able to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it matters. And then the last thing is that I think many people would report that the gradual accumulation of inner practices like meditation, developing inner strengths, inner skills, the gradual change of that have definitely improved global well-being
Mm-hmm.
over time significantly. And there's research that supports that as well. So I think there's a paper people might want to read called Beyond the Hedonic Treadmill. It came out some years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes some of the points I'm making here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's hope. The point is,
Mm-hmm.
there's a dosing effect for most things. If you
Yeah.
said to me, Rick, you can exercise all you want, but you will soon return to being, like out of shape. And that's just not true. I've gradually built muscle over the years. I'm in the best shape of my life at 71, really, because I've started taking it seriously. Uh, the point being, there's a relationship between effort in and results back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really wrong, and it's almost immoral, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to tell people things that take away their motivation for becoming wiser, stronger, more loving, more
Mm-hmm.
mindful, happier individuals.
So there definitely are real gains that can be made.
Yeah, totally. And just because some of them are not measurable in a 7-point Likert scale does not mean that the individual or the people who live with that individual cannot see genuine progress.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a, yeah. So, um, to people who, I'll just say this to finish, for people who are going into a scientific career,
Mm-hmm.
neuroscience, and studying things, and right, I think it's really important to keep in mind what it means to be truly scientific. Truly scientific is a spirit of curiosity and inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
and an openness to all kinds of evidence, not just the evidence from a very orthodox 10-year or longitudinal double-blind study. That also the truly scientific attitude recognizes the wide range of individual differences. Maybe some people are stuck on a hedonic treadmill. And then I would ask, why are they stuck on that treadmill compared to many other people who have made genuine gains over a time scale of years? Maybe not over a time scale of days and hours, but over a time scale of months and years. They've made genuine gains. Why not study those individual differences? All right. And so, also in science, just because there's no paper, no research yet, does not mean it does not work.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in medicine, the American Medical Association and the British Medical Society both estimate that roughly half of what healthcare workers do every day has not one single study in support of it.
Really.
Half. It does not mean that they are doing bad things. It just means there's no study yet. And a
Mm-hmm.
truly scientific attitude is summarized in the saying, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So, neuroscience is fantastic. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
glad people have a career in it. It's a baby science compared to chemistry and astronomy, if you think about it, which are 2,000 or so years old. Certainly astronomy, a couple thousand years old. Chemistry, really at least 500 years old, if not older.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, there's so much to learn. We know in some ways more about the backside of the moon than we know about the human brain,
Yeah.
including its deep, intricate network, dynamic, molecular processes. And what a wonderful career and what a wonderful opportunity for exploring deeply interesting topics that are personally relevant, as well as opportunities to help humanity.
Right.
Yeah, which also bring us into our kinship with non-human animals. You know, when you learn more about brain science, you look at a cat differently. You look at a fish or a lizard differently, and you start
Really?
realizing that many of the same fundamental structures that you and I draw on to have this conversation or to have experiences are present in simpler forms, but still basically present in terms of motivation and emotion and pain and pleasure in a lizard, certainly in a mouse or a squirrel or monkey or cat, as they are in us today. It gives us more sense of kinship with them and respect for them and care and concern for how we humans treat non-human animals.
Mm-hmm. Do you think human exceptionalism is like we're just
Arrogant and stupid.
yeah.
Arrogant and ignorant, I'll say that.
Mm.
Well, Simon, it's been a pleasure talking with
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
And for all our listeners, the links to Rick's website will be in the description. And yeah. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for being resilient in the face of some of our technical issues.
Yeah. Well, of course. All right. Well,
great.
Have a good night.
Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
You have a future in podcasting. Good job.
I'm trying out here. I'm trying. I just got to get a better router. Right. Have a good night.
Yeah, no worries. Take it easy and let me know in this post and maybe we can help support it.
Yeah. All right.
Will do.
Thank you so
take
much.
good care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.